Podcasting can have you live in a silo, but to be around 2,500 people, 3,000 people who share your passion and your love for podcasting, it doesn't feel lonely anymore.
All right, well, hey, friends, it's Eric Nevins here. You are listening to the Christian Podcasters, the official podcast of Christian Podcasters Association. Today, we got a really special episode that I want to share with you, but I just need to give you a few caveats right up front. This episode was recorded back in August at Podcast Movement, when Podcast Movement was here in Denver, in my hometown. It was super cool. We had a great time. A lot of CPA people were there, and I was super grateful that they were. So we had a big party in my backyard. I think some people talk about that. And then otherwise we were just kind of hanging out, doing the conferencey thing, networking, etc. So, but the important thing about going to a conference is all the things that you learn, right? You meet people and you learn. Well, I met a bunch of new people, and we also had a great conversation. So what I decided to do is to get together everybody on kind of towards the last day of the conference, get into a recording booth, have people come in and out and discuss what they've learned at the event. And we learned quite a few things. We had each person we had a little bit of a conversation with, and you'll get to meet some neat people here. I'm curious, if you were at Podcast Movement, what did you learn? And if you weren't, what struck you about what people shared that they learned? Is there a tactic or a tip that you're going to take away and to use? Why don't you let me know in the comments or in the Facebook group? I'd love to hear that. All right, so let's dive into this. By the way, it was in a, kind of a box. It's not sort of soundproof, but there's other people talking around and that kind of thing. So audio quality is what it is. You'll just have to deal with that. All right. Hey, let's go ahead and play this. Let's go. Hey, friends, welcome back to the Christian Podcaster. This is, as always, I'm your host, Eric Nevins. The Christian Podcaster is the official podcast of Christian Podcasters Association. Yeah. If you haven't joined us on the free Facebook group or at ChristianPodcastersAssociation.com, you should do that. We'd love to have you. We are reporting live from Podcast Movement. With me is Amy Fritz, the one and only. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm a little tired from all the excitement of the conference, and we're in a glass box sort of. So
it's amazing.
People outside that we can see.
So I thought, fun. Amy, you and I could just describe Podcast Movement a little bit, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you some of the questions that I want to ask everyone else, and we're going to have a few people cycle in here to just share some of the things that they learned. I know that not everybody could come to Podcast Movement, but if you couldn't, maybe you can still learn a little bit like we did as well, which I think is hopefully valuable for you. Okay, so describe Podcast Movement. This is the biggest convention of podcasters in the world. So I've been here 4 times, and this is your first time. Yeah. When you saw it, what did you think, and kind of how has it made an impression on you?
Well, I was a little intimidated before I came because I thought I am an introvert. All of this work, but there are a lot of people here that don't consider themselves super extroverts. So, what I thought was, oh my, look at this. There's no end to things to learn, which is really fun. They made a really awesome app for you to figure out when all the sessions are, where they are.
Yep.
Choose which one you want to do, and it makes a little schedule for you. And so you can choose all these different tracks of different things to choose from. Like if you're going to learn about marketing, if you're in the industry, there's an industry track, there's a creation track, there's the monetization track, and you don't have to stick with a certain track. You can pick and choose. So I have sort of jumped in and out of different tracks to learn different things.
Yeah. So was it overwhelming, or did anything surprise you about the conference?
What surprised me is that there are some super highly polished things. Mm-hmm. And then there's more of the casual people. You don't need to be a big, huge star to have a session. And that's for better or for worse, right?
Right.
Some of the high profile people may not actually have the best takeaways sometimes in their thing.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. It's always an interesting set who's doing the different sessions. I always come for the industry stuff. So Tom Webster yesterday was astounding and really good. Learned some good stuff today. The stuff about YouTube was both scary because like it means we probably got to get on YouTube, but also really important,
Well,
right?
here's
To
why
know.
I'm not scared, because what did they say was that, okay, even if you don't have video, be
Right.
there, because that's where people are finding. People are looking for podcasts,
Right.
and they're not necessarily needing video just because
Yeah.
they're on the platform. Like, you can get there,
Yeah.
but you could start with just
Right. And I
having
think
audio there.
I was thinking about how do we teach podcasters to do this, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be 2 tiers. And so this maybe is a preview. YouTube is working on RSS integration so that
Sure.
all you have to do is upload your RSS. It'll do the whole thing for you. So you can still have a channel. And then, but maybe then doing videos like a next level sort of thing. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure, a lot more.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question I'm going to ask everybody as they come in, first of all, let's promo your show. So tell us about
Sure.
your show.
Yeah.
And then what's one actionable item, something that you're going to take from here, go home and do?
Okay, sure. Well, I'm Amy Fritz. I am the host of the Untangled Faith podcast. It's a podcast for people who have been confused or disillusioned in their Christian faith journey. I say, these are people that love Jesus and they're hanging on to Jesus, but they're unbundling and untangling from all the other things that got kind of bundled up with their Christian faith. So it has been a fun journey for me because I just started in 2021, so relatively new. What I have learned that I really want to do is doing a feed drop in another person's podcast, which is I would record an episode and I would ask somebody if they would publish it on their podcast feed. And it would be an entire episode, is my understanding. So what I need to do is figure out who is in my niche, who is people, like where are my people listening? If they aren't necessarily listening to me.
Yeah, people who right, exactly.
to be
Who are your
targeted in
target
that.
audience, but not already aware of you.
So one way to do this, go to Apple Podcasts, scroll down to the bottom, go to Apple Podcasts, look up my own podcast.
Right.
Scroll to the bottom of the page and see. You may also like, if you like Untangled Faith, you may also like.
Yes.
They will have a list of podcasts. Those would be really warm targets for me to send a note to. And if anybody on that list is somebody I already know, even better.
Right. And then you can connect with them and try to do that. I'm really interested to see how that goes and see, because this is a new strategy.
Pay money to do that, right? So
Right.
like
Yeah.
I'll ask like what that is worth. Maybe somebody will be like, oh yeah, I don't charge anything for it, or maybe they'll say, yeah, this is like $1,000, or maybe it's
or you do
$50.
something reciprocal where they're in your show.
People
Sure.
do swaps. So
Yeah, interesting. Okay, I'll be interested to hear how that goes. So maybe since you're on the show regularly, we'll talk about it and we'll figure out how that goes and maybe evaluate
like a
it.
little, like experiment, and we see what happens.
Yeah,
with my
as a
downloads.
strategy. Okay,
So,
what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to just send in the next person.
okay, I will.
And then we will keep that rolling and keep the whole thing kind of going. So, yeah, there you go. All right. So, friends, as we do that, I love Podcast Movement. It's one of my favorite places. It happens this year to be in my hometown of Denver, Colorado. And so it's been a lot of fun to have people here. We had a barbecue at my house, which was really good. I made some ribs. That was a lot of fun. Have a seat. All right. So our next guest is
everyone.
Lori Adams Brown, right? Is that
That's
right?
right. Yeah,
Okay.
that's me.
And so, Lori, welcome to the Christian Podcaster. I'm glad you're here. We're going to do just a few minutes on you. So I want you to introduce your show, first of all, and I'll have a few questions for you.
Hi, yes, I'm Lori Adams Brown. I host the A World of Difference podcast. We're a podcast for those who want to celebrate our differences and bring our differences around the table to make a difference together. So yeah, I'm happy to be here at Podcast
I love
Movement.
that. Yeah. Has it been fun for you?
It's been a lot of fun. I've met people that I had met at a couple of other podcast conferences before. So reconnecting with some different podcasters and meeting new people like you.
Yeah,
Eric.
which is really great. We had lunch yesterday. It was a lot of fun. What is one thing that you have learned here at the event that you're going to implement? Because our audience is Christian podcasters. And so, so what's something that they can maybe take away even if they didn't get to come?
Yeah, well, I always come away, once again, this is my third podcast conference, and I always feel like every day is sort of like this fire hose.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information. So I've always had this policy personally that I don't want to try to implement more than 3 things.
It's a
And
good
so
idea.
I usually take a little time either on the plane ride or on the way home to just kind of synthesize everything. But what's standing out right now is I usually come to these events and I learn more about the technology. The technology is always changing. Obviously, AI has done incredible things in the last year. I've been using a product called Capshow that saved me a lot of time on my show notes, and got to meet the founder here. And she's a wonderful Australian woman who moved her family to Austin, Texas. And so I can relate to that. I've lived overseas in different places and moved my family here to the US not long ago. But my big takeaway is that I'm going to be switching my host because I've begun to learn a little bit more about the different options out there for hosting. And so I found one that's probably a better fit for me at this stage in my podcast. I'm 3 years in now, just had our 3rd anniversary.
Nice.
So I'm going to be switching my hosting platform and in the middle of that process now.
Which one did you decide to go with? Do you want to name them?
I would, except that I literally just got an email as I was walking in here because I just switched my RSS feed, and they said, we have now disabled your account because it looks like it's spam. You need to contact our customer support. Sure. So I'm like, maybe that wasn't a great call. We'll see if they figure it out. If they're quick, I'll still stick with it.
All right, moving your stuff can be a little bit, take some time, so you want to figure that out. All right. Good. Well, that's good. So you found a new host that you wanted to try and to see how that goes, which is one of the cool things about this event. I love that I've been able to meet like Rob Walsh. Yesterday I met Elsie Escobar at Libsyn, right? So she does those two do The Feed, which is a great show about podcasting. You should be listening to that if you're not. But that is so cool here. You can meet all the people. The whole industry's here. Mm-hmm. I've actually chosen not to do business with some people that I met here because I was like, I don't think I'd like to continue that relationship. And that's good to know. So I've enjoyed that. But generally it's more positive. So
I agree. So I'm obviously a very relational person. When it comes to right brain, left brain, I'm more on the left brain, but because I was raised in what we call the warm cultures of the world, which is like the tropical zones, I'm very relational. And obviously I spent 20 years, living in Asia as an adult in very tropical areas. So I'm very relational, even the way I do business. I work in tech, actually in Silicon Valley. So I'm a senior manager of global leadership and development. And a lot of what I do is related to how I build relationships, how I develop our leaders, is those, that EQ, the soft skills. And as a woman who owns my own podcast and makes those decisions for myself, this is something I created on my own for my own voice, but also to raise up voices of others, because I really believe the more diverse voices we have around the table, the more we include others and listen to each other, the more we grow and the better decisions we make. But as I've been here at this conference, there have been a couple of situations where as a woman, I felt diminished and not listened to, maybe a little bit infantilized by some people. And that to me is like, I don't have to work with people that do that. 99% of the people I interact with here are wonderful and great. And so since we have choices, it really does matter how you show up. So if I had any advice, I would say, if you're a person who runs anything in the podcasting industry, whether you're at one of these booths in the expo or you're just a podcast host, just don't assume when you meet someone that they're nobody. Assume that everybody you meet has actually worth and significance and has something you can learn from.
Yeah, and knows something, right? So, very interesting. I love that. Okay, so you're gonna change hosts. Is there anything else that you learned that you're like, you're gonna noodle on? You're gonna.
Yeah, I think, this morning in that keynote, they were talking about YouTube Shorts. I've been a reluctant YouTuber. My Gen Z 3 teenagers would be like, Mom, just get on there, even if it just posts the audio. Yeah. So I recently made the switch of putting it on there, but it felt like a big jump. It felt like a lot to add. But realizing today that YouTube Shorts is something we should probably add. It feels like a lot, but honestly, I could do it. So I'm going to try.
All right, that's good. I'll look forward to those.
Thank you. Nice to talk with you, Eric.
Thanks for stopping by.
Me on the show.
I really appreciate it. You are welcome to send somebody else in.
I will send in the next person.
All right.
Thank you.
Interesting. Yeah. So the whole thing with YouTube is pretty interesting. We talked about it a little bit earlier about some of the things that they're doing. I think you're going to need to keep your eye on that because more people are finding podcasts on YouTube. And one of the points that was made this morning was they can't find you if you're not there. So, Alajahwon, come on in, man. Hey. Good to see you. Welcome. You're going to need to bring that mic right over to your face. There you go. And, okay. So, Alajahwon, welcome to the Christian Podcaster. I'm really excited that you're here. This is our official podcast of Christian Podcasters Association. And making your first appearance, which is great. So, I want you to tell us a little bit about you and your show. And then I have a few questions for you.
Sure. I'm A.B. Ridgeway. My podcast is Financial Advisor. Say the darndest things in my mom's favorite Christian financial advisor. So we just pretty help people establish financial plans that align with the Word of God.
Excellent. I like that. That's good. So you're doing, then that's what you do on the show?
Yes.
Okay, great. And what is it called?
Financial Advisor. Say the darndest things.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. That's pretty interesting.
You have to say it that way, because if you don't say it that way,
it's clever. I like it. Okay. What's something, you've been around here all week, so what's one thing that you learned that you're going to take home that our friends listening, maybe they didn't get to come, and they can kind of take away also from the conference that we can share?
I think the biggest takeaway was the difference between passive and proactive engagement for your podcast. A lot of us are doing the right steps as far as producing content or having it available, maybe having it systematized, all those kind of fun things. But are we proactively engaging with other members? Are we getting into these associations and are we networking? Are we meeting the people that are behind these email addresses?
Yep.
And once you do that, you'll start seeing that shift and that growth. Instead of just kind of producing your podcast and letting it live somewhere where no one goes. I tell people, if you produce an episode out in the woods and no one's around to hear it, did you really create it? So that's my biggest takeaway. I think that people really revitalize you. I think podcasting can have you live in a silo where it can be lonely, but to be around 2,500 people, 3,000 people who share your passion and your love for podcasting, it doesn't feel lonely anymore.
Yeah.
It feels like maybe I just wasn't in the right spot.
Right. 100%. Okay. I'm going to elaborate on it because I think it is one of the key things I take away and love about podcast movement for sure. It's that, everybody here gets it, right? Like my family probably doesn't get how hard it is to start a podcast or how much work that takes. And I wish they did, and and they like it and whatever, but hanging out with podcasters, they get it and they understand the work that you're trying to do to reach an audience. I love this idea of passive versus active engagement. So what's something you're going to do to actively engage your audience and to bring them into a better and deeper relationship with you, because that's what it's all about, to make them clients ultimately, I assume.
Right. I think having the newsletter is great to get engagement, but also sending out those personalized emails like, hey, I'm the host of Financial Advisor, Say the Darndest Things. I've seen you signed up for 3 months. I would love to have a one-on-one conversation with you to get your feedback on how we can improve the podcast, because we do it for you. We want to get your feedback so we can make sure we tailor it and you stay a loyal listener. And I just think having a system where you may do that 5 times a week, or maybe, 20
which
times a month.
sounds like a time commitment, right? That sounds like quite a bit, but that's what builds those relationships. And those ultimately can lead to things. I know that these days, it seems like it's so much more powerful to plan for a long-term relationship with a client or with somebody versus, which probably, I'm sure that's what you want, right? You want to take somebody to retirement. That is so much smarter. I think you get so much more value, even if it takes them a couple of years to become your client.
Of course.
You might be getting decades worth of business versus, months.
Yeah. And I think we should measure, you're going to have to find your own goals of what you measure your success for. But for me, it's about how many people that you have in your community, in your support group. You could be I'm about 6'6". I don't know if you can see that on camera.
You're a big dude.
Yeah, I'm a big guy, but somebody may be able to bench, 500 pounds, right? But I have a community of people that can actually help me support and lift that weight. So I don't have to be the strongest man in the room.
Right.
I can lift 1,000 pounds because I have 2,000, 3,000 people to support me. So it's really about the relationships. Almost like you, Eric. The Christian Podcast Association is very, very great. I've had a wonderful time meeting new people and learn new ways to serve the Lord. And that's where your strength is going to come from, because I only have so many ideas. But Eric has a lot of ideas and all the other members as well.
I have more ideas than I can implement, and that's the problem. So that's like, it makes me run around a little bit. But
just pass them to me.
Okay, I've got a lot. Maybe I should do that, like a little in the newsletter. 5 ideas I had that I can't do. You take them.
Hey, no problem. Just make sure you give me credit at the bottom.
There we go. That's great. I love it. Well, so that's really interesting. Okay, so doing some one-on-ones with your audience and trying to get friends, I got to just tell you how powerful that is. If you can connect personally with your audience, you will learn things and just listen, right? Just listen. You don't even have to just ask a couple of questions and then be quiet and just listen to what they say. And if they get quiet and they stop talking, stay quiet and just leave that space for an uncomfortable amount of time.
Yes.
And then they'll start talking again, because most people can't stand that. And you will yield gold as you do it. So I think that's brilliant.
I'm gonna say one thing to that. Yeah, I used to be in sales a long time ago, and in that awkward pause, we used to say, "Whoever speaks first loses."
Yeah, absolutely.
But in podcasts, the first one who speaks is not listening.
Right. Here. And you need to do that with your audience, especially if you're wanting ultimately to monetize. I know, like, yours is leading to your business. Some of us are trying to build other businesses. Hearing what your people need and creating a product for them is so important and powerful. That's a really good one. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate it as
well.
well.
I love that.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Video. Hey, this is Alajahwon Ridgeway, financial advisor.
There you go. Where can people find you?
You can go to my website, abrwealthmanagement.com. We have everything that lives there, the podcast, the new ebook that's coming out, the 4 Pillars for Christian Investing. It's a beginner's guide for those who are trying to steward God's wealth and save for retirement. So you can check all those free resources.
Love it.
There.
I love it. Thanks for being here. Will you send the next person in?
I will.
Tell them that it's time.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Man, you guys, that is so powerful. Just connect with your audience. Connect with them. Talk with them. Create something for them. That's like the basic formula. It's really good. Alrighty, we got Melissa Weber.
Hello,
Melissa.
yeah.
All right. I'm glad. Welcome to the Christian Podcaster.
Awesome.
This is, I'm excited to have you here. This is fun.
Excited to be here.
All right. So I'd like to start with, can I tell us about who you are and your show?
Okay.
And then I got a few other questions for you.
Awesome. So actually we have Tablecast, Come to the Table with Melissa and Amanda. And that is all things Christian communication for women, podcasting, author, speaker, all the good things, very purposeful. And then we are actually launching a new podcast.
All right, friends.
It's going to be great.
Podcasting is addicting. And so it's really hard to it's like a bag of chips. It's hard to have only one.
True. It's definitely.
Because you suddenly start to see, there's an opportunity there as well. All right. So what's the new podcast?
So the new podcast will be called Burning Butterflies. And we are going to be unpacking our toxic church culture experience. And actually, that's like my takeaway from the conference and my implementation from the conference.
All right. Which you knew I was going to ask you that. All right. So what's that one thing that you've learned and you said, okay, we're going to do this, and then you're going to go execute?
Yeah. And that was, like when you have a topic and you have something that you've come into, which is really where our podcast started, which was our journey through that toxic church culture. And then I really wanted to leave it behind. I'm like, yeah, we covered it. It was great. And then sitting in a session, in the, with the influencers, the Instagram influencers, and they're like, yeah, we're just going back and unpacking our content because there's so much behind the scenes and stuff. And then that just inspired me to be like, wow, we could do such a better service to what we did. And so that was my takeaway. And sitting with, in the women's session and just being comfortable with the pause and being comfortable with other people being uncomfortable in your confidence. And so I was like, okay,
I love that.
I see it.
I was literally just talking about that with Alajahwon, the idea of just asking your audience for feedback and then don't say anything.
Yeah.
And
being okay with that.
If it's awkward silence for a while, and he said, hey, the first one who speaks loses, right? So which is a sales technique.
I'm competitive. I like that.
Yeah, right. So you just wait it out, because you're going to get some gold sometimes that way if you let people speak. I like that.
Yeah. And so it just really clicked with that. Be okay with other people being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
It doesn't have a reflection on you and where you're at and what you're doing. And I'm like,
that's such a personal growth issue, thing, right? Where you can go, okay, I can be okay if you're okay. That's basically the definition of not being codependent, right? You're codependent if you have to make the other person feel good so that you feel good. So just letting that space and be differentiated is really good.
Oh, am I going to have to pay you for this therapy session
yes,
right there?
Yes, you do. My Cash App is at the bottom of my dot cards, so you should definitely send me money.
Because that right there, I'm going to go reevaluate my life now. No.
It's just the way it is.
That's how it goes sometimes.
Sometimes you learn stuff. Okay, well that's good. Okay, so new podcast is is, what'd you call it?
Burning Butterflies.
Burning Butterflies. And this is about the toxic church culture?
And this will be our walk, because on our podcast, before we started our media company and before we launched into helping women have a place, a space, and a voice for their purpose and their calling, you got a front row seat to our coming out of toxic church culture and deconstructing, but still keeping our faith. And that was something we weren't finding a lot of in what was out there was, I want to, a lot of people are questioning religion and Christianity and faith and themselves, but not a lot of people are saying, but I want to hold on to my relationship with Jesus. I want to hold on to God.
This is why I like you, because that was part of the impetus for my show as well, right? Yeah. Was I wanted to let people know the dark night of the soul is normal. God's people have been going through it for millennia, and there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Even, as one of my friends, Laura Forehand, said once, the desert can be beautiful. Yeah. If you know what to look for. Right. So I love that. Okay. Well, thank you for being here. Yes, I really appreciate it. It's been great to meet you and get to talk a little bit. So it's been fun.
Wonderful. So, thank you. And I think you have Amanda coming in.
I think so. Next, She's coming in. That'd be great.
All right.
I love that, friends. So the whole idea of, spirituality or Christianity and going through the dark seasons is definitely important. Speaking of dark, we've got Amanda. No, I'm just kidding. Didn't mean that. Amanda, and it's Turnbull, right?
Yep.
Is that right? I thought I'd get that right. So, and you are Melissa's co-host.
Yes, I co-host with Melissa.
Tell us a little bit about you, and then your version of your show, because I bet you might describe it a little differently.
So I grew up in Wyoming, just kind of a real small town girl. Ended up in Colorado by marriage, and
it's a good place to be.
Yes, beautiful place to be. And met Melissa going to church, and that's kind of all she wrote for that.
That's good.
Our podcast is Tablecast, Come to the Table with Melissa and Amanda, and we interview women. We give them a place and a space to share their stories and be able to just give them the confidence to know that they have a calling on their life and God is doing something awesome and amazing in their life.
Which is so powerful. All right. So what's one thing that you learned at this conference that you're going to take action on and you're going to implement in the coming, let's say, days and weeks?
So Melissa has been saying for a while, we need to start a second podcast.
That's what she said. Burning butterflies?
Yes. And so
it sounds like Burning Man. So I think if you...
So we have a church trauma story. And that's kind of how our podcast kind of evolved. And our early episodes of that podcast, we really focused on telling our story. And we healed. We moved on. We kept our faith. We are doing great things with God. But what we discovered this week was we kind of just left those stories there. And in order to do justice to the fact that, yes, there was hurt and there was pain and there was trauma, there's also so much hope and healing that comes through Jesus. And we need to go back and unpack that, because there's so much out there for the Christian who has deconstructed and walked away completely. We want to be that beacon of hope that, some cruddy stuff might have happened and went down, but God.
Yeah.
And so we always said Christian life seems like it's all hearts and butterflies until it burns to the ground. So that's where the burning butterflies comes from.
And again, friends, I want to emphasize, maybe you haven't been through something like that, but this is not unusual for God's people, right? Yeah. I mean, read Jeremiah, read the Psalms, go read it. It's been there for a long, long time. All of them. And so it's just a normal part of the Christian, a life with God. It's a normal part of a life with God. And yet, finding a way through and trusting Him, even in the middle of those questions, is really, really powerful. So, and possible. It is possible. So I love that you're going to do that. I think that's really great. So starting a new show. So you came to Podcast Movement and you said, one's not enough. I got to have two.
Well, every time Melissa would bring it up in the past, she's like, I see your face tense up with because everything in me was just like, oh my gosh, that's more time. That's more this, that's a whole second caseload to take on.
Yeah.
But really what God showed us is no, we met people, this is not a Christian conference. There's secular people here. We met people and who flat out said like, oh, I'm agnostic or I'm atheist. And, we shared a little bit about our story. And we ended up having dinner with a lady last night who's like, I'm not religious, but she wanted to sit and listen to our whole story. We sat there for like 3 hours at dinner last night with her.
That's great.
And so we gained a lot of confidence in just knowing that, no, our story is powerful across the board.
Yeah.
And that God's redemption is so powerful. It just permeates any noise and any darkness.
Amen. I think with that, that's a great place to wrap that up.
Awesome. Thank
I think
you.
it's perfect. Thank you so much, Amanda, for coming in here. I appreciate your story. It's been really great to meet you as well. It's been so much fun. All right. Oh, friends. So these issues are near and dear to my heart, as you might imagine. We have a few more people to pop in here for sure. I think we got at least 3 more people, which would be great. Ryan, come on in, man. Have a seat. We are live. Grab the microphone there. All right. Ryan, is it Clevenger? Clevenger. All right.
Yep.
Make sure I get that pronounced right. From Our Daily Bread.
Yes.
Okay. So tell us about kind of you and what you're doing at Our Daily Bread.
Yes. My name is Ryan Clevenger, and I am the podcast producer for Where You're From, which is an origin story podcast at the intersection of faith and culture. I've been with Our Daily Bread for 5 years, but I've been doing podcasting for coming up on 2 years now.
Great. Do you host the show?
I do not.
Okay.
I'm not. The
You're a
host
producer.
I'm the producer. The host is Rasul Berry. He's a pastor at the Bridge Church in New York, but he also works with Our Daily Bread Ministries.
Love it. Okay. So what's one thing, this question I'm asking everybody, because, our audience didn't get to come, right? So not everybody gets to come to Podcast Movement, even though it's in my hometown of Denver. And so I highly recommended everybody come to my hometown. What's something that you take away from this week that you're going to actually go home and implement in that podcast?
Yeah. So there's a lot. I came last year, learned a lot, and I really wasn't sure if I would want to come back again. And I'm glad I did, though. Walking in, there's just a lot of sessions, a lot of people.
It can feel a little overwhelming.
It can feel very, very overwhelming. So I was much more selective this year.
That's the right move.
And prioritized really talking with people. And that's really been the greatest benefit for me personally, is making those connections with other podcasters. A lot of Christians as well, which really surprised me. Not really surprised me. I would have people who would say, oh, Our Daily Bread Ministries, I'm a Christian. And we would have some really interesting conversations. As far as what I want to apply to my podcast, Where You're From, one of the things that I often find myself tempted to do is to just get into the routine. This is the way we've been doing it. It seems to be working well. And I've been really challenged to rethink and go back to the drawing board, really. And why are we doing what we're doing? And why are we doing it the way that we're doing it? And can we do it better?
Okay, I love that. It's one of the things that I preach to our podcasters in our gold membership and pretty much on here every time I talk just about is the value of iteration, right? So even, it's great to get your processes going, but then sometimes every once in a while, maybe once a year, go back and go over them and see if there's something else that you can do. So I'll give you an example for me. Show notes, I've been doing the same way for 6-7 years now, right?
Yeah.
And now Cap Show's out there and I could do better show notes in less time. And I'm like, oh, well, all right. So maybe I need to adjust my process. And so that's a really good takeaway, I think. Take a look at it.
Yeah. So one thing specifically, to give a concrete example for us, is because we're an origin story podcast, and often people, if they tell their story enough, they get pretty routine with their story. And what we want is people to relax and be willing to open up and share sometimes surprising things that they're surprised to even be sharing. And so we schedule a 2-hour interview time, which people are always shocked by. They're also shocked how quickly it goes by.
Right.
But then post-production, it takes a lot of time to then edit that down into a more of a streamlined story that is closer to an hour 15 minutes.
Wow.
And so the first day, a guy just point blank told me, you need to come up with a series of questions, same questions that you give your guest ahead of time. And that was really uncomfortable for me because in my mind, we want the person to not have that plan, to make it more of a free-flowing conversation.
Right.
But I do actually think that was good advice. It doesn't have to be specific questions, but just specific topics. Here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about your hometown because we believe that we live influences who we are. We'll talk about your parents, your relatives, your friends, those types of things, just so that they're primed and they are more quickly ready. So we don't have to maybe take as many rabbit trails.
I love that. Okay. So the way I do this on my show Halfway There is I have a guest preparation doc that everybody can download at the end. And I do a lot of the same questions because I'm trying to get certain information, but not always the same way, or I leave a lot of room for me to follow curiosity, but I give them that sort of basic structure that's behind the scenes so they can see these are the topics we're trying to go into, and this is what we want to do. And I want them to at least have thought of us like stories, especially if you can sit down and think about this happened and the pastor said that or whatever it is.
Yeah,
that helps them create a more vivid story for you.
Yes,
without having it be programmatic. Maybe.
Yes,
so I think that's a good move. I like it.
Yeah,
I like it. Very cool. Thank you for being here, Ryan. I really appreciate it. And it's been great to meet you and just kind of hang out a little bit. I'm glad you're here. Yeah. And let's connect again.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Good. Thanks.
Send the next guy in. I think Chris and Norm maybe are next. All right. Excellent. Friends, I hope you're enjoying this. This is certainly an interesting approach to podcasting. Hey, Norman. Good to see you.
Greetings.
Norman Smith, get right up on the mic.
Greetings.
Yeah, there you go. Norman Smith is he's been my guest this week, which has been a lot of fun. We've been spending a lot of time in the car together, eating fast food.
It's been good. Coffee and burritos.
A lot of that. So, Norman, tell us a little bit about your show and yourself and kind of what you're doing at the moment.
Sure. My name is Norman Smith. I do the Run with Horses podcast. I still am a missionary. I've been a missionary in Japan for 20 years. So a lot of what I do is take lessons that I've learned working primarily with the international population in Japan, taking some of those lessons and putting it into podcast form. My goal is really to help people be more intentional in their walk with Christ and to really thrive as disciples of Jesus. I mean, I think that there's nothing better that you can do than be part of the mission of Christ in the world. I think there's no greater place of joy. And I love it and try to pull people along with me.
I love that. I think that's really great. Okay, so the question I've been asking everybody is, what's one thing that you've learned here that you are going to take home and implement?
I don't have an answer to that. So there's a lot of different things here that are interesting. How many of them apply to me? I guess the one thing I've learned is there is a big push in the marketing, thinking about promoting yourself and branding and all that. So how do I do that as a Christian? As far as I don't have one thing to implement, but I want to think through that. I am not here to promote myself. I want to promote Jesus, and I want to promote Jesus in my marketing, in my promoting the podcast and what I'm doing. I want to show the spiritual value in that. Yeah. So to be more intentional about doing that in the marketing.
I think that's an actionable step, right? So even if you go home and say, all right, how am I going to think about my marketing efforts and how I do that in a way that represents Christ? Well, it's to help because especially if those are people that you're trying to attract to from your show, how does it resonate with them, and how do you attract those right people? I think that's actually a great thing. Sounds like you need a brainstorming session.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the things that I'll do. And one of the options is just to quit and not do any more podcasting and go find a cabin in the top of a mountain and have nothing else to do with technology and people. And I there's a lot of good points to that.
Just becoming a hermit.
Yeah, I think I'd be an excellent hermit.
All right, that's good, I guess. I think probably you're an introvert who's just burned out
there's
from
that
all the week. Okay, that's good. That's fantastic. I think that's okay. All right. And you've also been thinking about maybe doing some other things with your show, right? As far as maybe adding some other features or doing it a little bit differently.
I haven't done a lot of interviews to this point. So one of the things I wanted to get is how that works. And I've been talking to some people about some of the technology for interviewing. But yeah, I would like to do that. I'm interested in talking to people. I love to hear their story of how God has worked to this point and what are the lessons they've learned that are valuable for all of us. We're in community in the church. We're in this together.
Hopefully.
And every single person has lessons that they've learned. They don't always think about them. Everyone doesn't process them the same. Some people don't think about it until you ask them the question. So I think those conversations can be valuable, and I would really enjoy them. Whether anybody else would or not, I don't know.
Okay, I want to just elaborate on that point a little bit because I think it does matter. If you're not having fun, probably your audience isn't having fun, right?
Right.
If you're having a conversation that you are enjoying and that you're passionate about, that's going to come through on the mic, and you're gonna that enthusiasm, even digitally. I know we get kind of people. I prefer in person. It's been great to like meet you in person. We knew each other digitally before, but. So there's value to that, but even digitally, that enthusiasm can seep over. I have so many people who have come on my show, and then I think of them as friends now, right? Because they've shared their stories with me. I've connected with them. I've helped them, served them, and so that seeps through everything.
Well,
that you
people
do,
are awesome.
so.
I mean, if you are interested in people, which I am,
agree.
people are awesome, and everyone has a really cool story. If you can find out how to draw that out.
Amen. Okay, that's a great action step. So, friends, you guys can do that. Cool. Norman, where can people find you?
Runwithhorses.net is the webpage. I'm on every platform where you stream podcasts. Run with Horses.
Excellent. Thanks
Thank
for popping in.
Awesome.
I appreciate it. I've enjoyed spending a good chunk of the week with you. So that's great.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. So you can just send the next person in. This has been fun. So, guys, if I would kind of describe this where it's like this big pod here that you're in, and then we can just pop in. Is Chris not out there? Did Chris bail? Okay, good enough. Chris, I'm not mad. It'll be fine. All right, Amy. So there's my buddy Ed Squire actually walking down. So that's cool. So Amy, we talked to a bunch of podcasters. We got a bunch of really great insights, actually.
I have no idea what they said, so I'm dying to know what they said.
Well, you have to listen
to the
episode.
Come on.
But I think there were a few things, and we can mention them just by way of wrapping up. Yeah. So I think with Alajahwon, we talked about the value of leaving space in a conversation to listen. We talked about the value of a spiritual journey and going through dark seasons where you find light at the end of the tunnel. I love what Norman said. He said, people are awesome. And if you can draw that story out, that's a really good thing. And
Norman
so, of course, I agree with that. Yeah.
Norman is all about the story.
That's
so
good.
That's great.
So it's a lot of good. Okay. I wanted to debrief. Maybe we kind of talked about a little bit earlier, the idea of, about YouTube, talking about YouTube, that session that we went to this morning. What were your takeaways for that? And what do you think like an average podcaster needs to be thinking about?
Big takeaway is if you think of YouTube like a search engine, that may help you.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So it's one of the biggest places people are going to just type in something and find content.
That was a really interesting slide where he said how satisfied are people with what they find when they search on YouTube?
Yeah.
And it was very, very high. And I thought to myself during the session, well, yeah, that makes sense because they're owned by Google and they better have great search in YouTube.
Yeah, they're going to have
And I'll be honest, there's other platforms, I'm not going to mention any names, but where I go and search for podcasts and I can't find them even if I'm using the exact title of a show, right? Yeah, that's ridiculous. So YouTube, actually, if you're looking to solve the the discoverability issue, you should maybe be on YouTube.
Yeah, if you want to be findable, definitely be on there. And talking about like the definition of podcast now really depends on how you started. Like if you view it as audio or if you view it as video. Like they're talking about consuming podcasts rather than watching or listening. Yes. Not everybody consumes the content the same way.
Which I thought was really interesting as well, because they were like, look, your audience defines them this way, no matter how you define them. I'm old and a little bit curmudgeonly in podcasting, and so I'm like, no, it's audio
Don't say that, Eric. We're both the
only,
same here.
audio only. But that's how I feel about podcasting. Anyway, I'm like,
you've been in the podcast world.
Yeah. So that's how I want it to be, but it doesn't really matter how I want it to be. What matters is how people are finding it. Right? How are they finding it? So this will be video on YouTube, right?
Yeah, because we
will
have
be able to share.
Yeah, this is cool because we have a video already being done right now.
Exactly.
But the thing is, don't feel intimidated if you are like, I don't have video, because you can actually put your audio file on YouTube.
And that's better than nothing. I think of First Step. We kind of mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, and talking with our kids, they often will like listen to a YouTube podcast rather than watch it. They put it on, even if there's no video.
And then they're doing other stuff. Yeah.
And they're like,
and do you know what? Okay, so like Locked On, the network sponsored that session. Do you remember that? And I listened to the Locked On Cardinals podcast because I'm a St. Louis Cardinals guy.
Yeah.
JD Haffron, he's great. But I go to YouTube every day almost, like during lunch usually, and I play it, and I'll let him listen, and then I'll check email while I'm eating my sandwich or whatever, and that's just
when you can watch when you want to watch.
I could I could subscribe on a platform, but I don't. I get it on YouTube. So I what they said really resonated with me for even how I'm using it,
right?
And that's when so the thought to me was, I should be paying attention to how I'm getting content in order to have an idea of how my audience is getting content and how they're discovering things.
And we found out in this session today, they're like, actually, YouTube has a whole like manual for how to do YouTube podcasts.
I know. I can't wait
we had no idea, so I just did a quick Google search.
Yeah.
Found a PDF, emailed it to Eric. Now we're going to share it with all y'all.
Yeah, dive into that kind of stuff.
We could probably link it in the show notes.
I'm sure we can. Yeah, that'd be good. So, okay. Yeah. All right. Well, Amy, it's been a really amazing week. We're kind of wrapping everything up today. I really appreciate you kind of being around and hanging out. It's been a lot of fun. Great to meet you. We had never met in person. So
no, the first time Eric had a bunch of us over to his house for barbecue, which was so fun.
It was amazing. I got to finally make some ribs for CPA people, which is the first time I've been able to do that.
Barbecue, and Jody made this amazing shortcake.
She's good. Yeah, the shortcakes are good. That's pretty tasty. All right. Friends, thanks for being here. This is the Christian Podcaster. What action step are you going to take? So we got a bunch of great ideas here just from all of our friends that were at Podcast Movement in 2023. There's probably one that resonates for you or one thing. I don't care. Again, if you don't have to take massive action. I mean, that's great if you can do it, but take one step, just iterate one thing. If you can change one thing every single month or every single quarter, 2 years from now, you'll have a really amazing podcast and you'll be really proud of. And that's what I'm after, to help you connect with your audience. So,
and we want to help you. Join the Christian Podcasters Association Facebook group if you haven't. It costs absolutely nothing. We have people popping in there all the time, sometimes asking for help with something, saying, I don't exactly know how to do this thing. And we also have a way of helping connect people with different podcasts.
Right.
We have a post where people add looking for guests or that they're willing to be a guest. We talk about some best practices sometimes, and then we go a little deeper in the CPA Gold group.
Yeah.
So
different community podcasters who are investing in their shows and in themselves to grow. And so if that's you, come join us, ChristianPodcastersAssociation.com/gold. We'd love to have you in there as well.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Amy. It's been fun.
Yeah, it has been.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I don't know how we stop.
Well, we have 3 minutes left, and it'll just keep recording unless we do something.
Okay. Well, we can leave this.
We can probably hit the stop button, but maybe I don't know if we're supposed
Is
to
there
do
a
that.
stop button? Oh, on the stream deck. Is there a stop button?
Stop.
All right. There we go.
There we go. Hey, look, this is cool.